Chink. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. One of the many socially accepted sayings we are brainwashed to believe, but is a total lie. It was something I repeated over and over to myself growing up as I heard the racist slang, chink, 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 jap, 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 being shouted at me. Words can hurt just as easily as they can heal. Words can also leave scars, which they did to me. I bore the torture of my oldest brother who would holler chink at me over and over until I ran into my room and cried in shame. At summer camp, although I never told anyone, there was a boy who used to torture me behind everyone's back, yelling Jap at me over and over. I had no idea why he would say that. It was so awful. I hated how I looked. These words damaged my self-esteem and scarred me for life. My brothers never stood up for me when kids teased me either, and that hurt me more. I found this short story from an email from my dad. A group of frogs were traveling through the woods, and 2 of them fell into a deep pit. When the other frogs saw how deep the pit was, they told the 2 frogs that they were as good as dead. The 2 frogs ignored the comments and tried to jump up out of the pit with all their might. The other frogs kept telling them to stop, that they were as good as dead. Finally, one of the frogs took heed to what the other frogs were saying and gave up. He fell down and died. The other frog continued to jump as hard as he could. Once again, the crowd of frogs yelled at him to stop the pain and just die. He jumped even harder and finally made it out. When he got out, the other frog said, "Did you not hear us?" The frog explained to them that he was deaf. He thought they were encouraging him the whole time. This story teaches 2 lessons. 1, there is power of life and death in the tongue. An encouraging word to someone who is down can lift them up and help them make it through the day. And 2, a destructive word to someone who is down can be what it takes to kill them. Be careful what you say. Speak life to those who cross your path. The power of words. It is sometimes hard to understand that an encouraging word can go such a long way. Anyone can speak words that tend to rob another of the spirit to continue in difficult times. Special is the individual who will take the time to encourage another. Author unknown. Almond eyes. It was brutal looking different. I was so sensitive. I ran away in hidden shame in my bedroom, crying my almond eyes out. I didn't understand why everybody made fun of my eyes. I never told anyone, just kept the feelings hidden and started building a shell around my heart. Enduring this form of bullying was the start of my toughness. My other brother and I were a little closer, maybe because we were so close in age, only 9 months apart. Although we used to physically fight with each other, I knew he cared about me. When we were older and went out, he had an infamous way of introducing me to people. He said, "This is my sister Steph." Then people would have a confused look on their face because I looked nothing like him. My brother had blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. He then said, "We're Siamese twins, but she got all the Siamese." It always broke the ice and made people laugh. That was the silver lining my brother gave me. That and when Eugene committed suicide. My brother was the only one who seemed to care from my family. He was overseas in the military, but took the time to write me beautiful, heartfelt letters that I cherish to this day. Those letters were gold to me. My mother got remarried 2 years after she moved out, when I was 11 years old. They had another child, my stepsister Shannon, who I adored. My mother also found her calling in life, the fire department, to which she was dedicated. I grew up at the firehouse on the weekends when we stayed with her. During the night, the radio would go off, and she frequently would have to run out to a call. She would sleep a lot during the day from the stress of it all. Needless to say, she wasn't too available for us either. It seemed like her career and new relationship were her priority. After my mother moved out, I felt abandoned all over again and held it against her most of my life. I'm sure that was part of the reason we never had a close relationship, but I also never felt she was a mother to me. In my eyes, she was not there for me in any way. Since then, I have forgiven her. I realized she was just as wounded as I was. Still, when you are a young child, it is a major wound and loss. When my mother and stepfather bought a house, the plan was to make the basement into 3 bedrooms for my 2 brothers and me. That never happened. The basement became a storage unit for their stuff. My stepfather was a nice man, and I tried to get along with him, but he was another adult in my life with a drinking problem. When we came to visit and stay for a weekend, we ended up sleeping on the pull-out couch in the living room that was stuffed with his used tissues. It was a cramped, tiny house, and none of us had our own space. It was awkward, but I tried to make the best of it. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. My obsessive neatness started then as well. My mother was not neat, and to live in chaos was stressful to me, even at the age of 11. On the weekends when we came to visit, I spent the whole day cleaning her kitchen. So when she came home from work, she would notice it and give me praise. It was my way of getting her approval, love, and acceptance. Even though my mother appreciated my cleaning, she would rant that she could never find anything after I cleaned, since I threw things away. I can't stand clutter. Neither can angels. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Feeling like an outsider inside my family, I pretty much raised myself. I always knew I was different. My adopted family was Caucasian, Irish, German, and French, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. Even though I was different looking, exotic according to many people, I felt like an ugly duckling. I was a mix of nationalities, but never knew which, since my adopted parents didn't even know. I remember hearing my parents say I was Polynesian or Philippine. I felt like they said that because it was less Asian, Oriental back then, and more acceptable, which made me feel more insecure. Adoption wasn't common at that time, and it didn't help that we lived in an all-white, middle to upper-class neighborhood. There was only one other Asian kid in my school. We were in the honors acceleration classes together, of course. The ugly duckling. People would stare at me and ask me the same questions, and still do to this very day. What are you? Where are you from? Are you Chinese? Are you Japanese? Ugh, it was irritating. Didn't people know there were other Asian nationalities besides Chinese and Japanese? At first, I used to say I was Polynesian, but nobody knew what that meant, including me. So I changed it to Philippine. That seemed to appease their curiosity about me. It seemed like everyone else was more concerned with my nationality than I was. I really didn't care much at all. I felt like just saying, I'm from God, which is the truth. All I cared about was looking less like I did and fitting in with everyone else. This was also a trait my daughter picked up. One day after school, when she was 12 years old, she told me she wished she looked like Danielle, who had blonde hair and blue eyes. That was the end of living in Kings Park, a predominantly white neighborhood. We moved from the North Shore of Long Island across the island to the South Shore, where there was much more diversity. When my daughter and I visited Hawaii, it was the first place that felt like home to me and where I belonged. One day while shopping, I asked the price of something, and the woman replied, "I give you the resident price." First of all, I didn't know there was a tourist price and a resident price, but I didn't care. I was so happy that she thought I was Hawaiian. At last, I thought, I found my roots, my people. I started telling people I was Hawaiian when I got back home. It seemed more socially acceptable and brought less feelings of shame to me. It turned out that I felt that way in a lot of places I traveled to: Argentina, Brazil, Spain, Portugal, Hawaii, Italy, India, Mexico, even Africa. I felt more at home than I did on Long Island. People didn't stare at me in these other countries like they did in the United States. People just assumed I was one of them. In Egypt, it went so far that a boy ran up to my dad shouting, "My queen, my queen, my queen, I will give you 1,000 camels for her." My dad jokingly replied yes, and I went into a panic until I realized my father was kidding and would never sell me for camels. That was the positive side to looking and being different. I felt like I could morph and blend into almost any culture, and I liked connecting to other people. I felt comfortable around all types of people and in all types of settings. This quality of being mutable and adaptable has come to serve me well. By then, though, I had a complex, and it wasn't good. It was complex. The damage was done, and my self-esteem was deflated. I was on the softball team in high school, and the boys used to yell at me when I was up at bat, "Open your eyes." It was humiliating. By the time I was 15 years old, I decided after watching an Oprah show that when I turned 18, I would get surgery that would give me an eyelid to make me look less Asian, so people would stop making fun of me. I began to save up my money but never followed through. Instead, I just continued to try to look less Asian by perming and dyeing my hair and wearing a lot of eye makeup. It wasn't just my eyes that were the object of my mockery, my body was as well. I was bow-legged, which my brothers took complete advantage of any chance they got, mimicking the way I walked and swam. They called me Bubble Butt, and they said I must be part black, referring to Janet Jackson. I know your siblings are supposed to tease you, but for my sensitive soul, it was overkill. It only made me feel even more self-conscious. Ignorance of my nationality, my ancestry, and lacking any baby pictures or conventional memories gave me such a sense of alienation that I felt like I never belonged anywhere. It never really fazed me about not having baby pictures until one day about 3 years ago. I was at a client's house, and she was so excited to show me the photo album she made for her daughter's 25th birthday. It was filled with pictures of her and records of all her accomplishments from birth to present. She was so proud of it and her daughter. I smiled on the outside, but inside I felt complete heartbreak at the realization that I didn't have one baby picture of myself. But worse, I never had anyone in my life that cared for me like that. There was a hole in my heart that felt so vast. I wondered if it would ever be filled. If anyone would ever love me like that. My saving graces were exercise, music, sports, dance, and anything physical. That was my form of stress and emotional release. I was a tomboy to the core. My dad pushed me to get into modeling in high school, and I refused. I just want to play sports, I implored. I refused to wear dresses, play with Barbies that were all still in the box at the back of my closet, and only wore boys' jeans. I loved a physical challenge. Having all brothers kept me active. We always were playing tennis, going ice skating, skiing, playing basketball or hockey, skateboarding, and riding bikes. I played field hockey, basketball, softball, and was a cheerleader all throughout middle school and high school. I also danced. When I was 12 years old, I would go into my room, turn on the music, dance, and work out on my own. No DVD, no YouTube. I never needed motivation to move my body. Music and exercise were the only things that made me feel good. Unfortunately, having low self-esteem and an addiction to my body image, the only thing that gave me a boost in confidence, left me susceptible to bulimia in high school. I thought it was pretty cool that I could eat whatever I wanted, throw it up, and not gain a pound of weight. I was self-conscious about my looks and never wanted to be fat or out of shape. I thought, if I have an ugly face, at least let me have a nice body. Since eating sweets seemed to comfort me, I thought I had the best of both worlds. I didn't know any better back then. It wasn't until my boyfriend caught me throwing up Thanksgiving dinner at his house and read me the riot act that I stopped. I knew deep down that it was unhealthy, and being a healthy athlete was important to me. There was a boy in my high school who gave me my first memorable compliment. He said to me one day, "You weren't just born. God created you." It was so different to have someone praise me. He probably never knew what an impact that statement had on me, and that I remember it to this day. Thank you, David. Where the heck am I? As a child, I felt misplaced in a harsh world. I saw the world differently, thought differently, felt things very deeply. I was sensitive and had no one in my life that supported me or even understood me. Being brought up Catholic, the religion classes, and receiving my confirmation in the church just made me more confused. I didn't understand what God was, who Jesus was, and what the point of religion was. I didn't know there were other people like me. I used to look up at the stars at night, my heart aching, whispering, I want to go home. I sat up in our 200-foot pine tree and contemplated how I could heal the world, or sometimes I'd walk to the beach by myself and sit on this rock in the middle of the Long Island Sound and think about what happiness felt like or what love really was. It felt like those two things were missing from my life. My survival tactic for my sensitive heart was, it could always be worse, I used to ponder. I could have been adopted by drug dealers or been in a physically abusive household or lived in the ghetto and had no food. At least I'm getting a good education and have traveled around the world. I may not have a lot of love and support, but I have food, clothing, and shelter. I always looked for the silver lining. I cried when I read the newspaper or heard the news or even just saw someone else crying. I was so sensitive and compassionate, I thought something was wrong with me. I questioned why there was so much suffering in the world. It didn't make sense how some people lived so lavishly while others needlessly suffered. Then I would wonder how people could ignore it when it hurt me so much. To this day, when my daughter and I watch TV, she turns to me and says, "Oh my God, Mom, are you crying again? It's a cartoon, Mom." Or, "It's a commercial, Mom, really?" Anything endearing or touching would invoke the tears to flow. When I watched The Passion by Mel Gibson, which I watched most of it with my eyes closed and my ears plugged with my fingers, I sat in the movie theater until it emptied out, and then started bawling like a baby. I had no idea where these deep sobs were coming from. I was traumatized by this movie. My date had no idea what to do, poor guy. Thank God he was a kind soul. Even though it's a blessing, the modern world we live in does not promote compassion or empathy. It's looked upon as weakness. I used to think that something was wrong with me, but now I know something is wrong with the world. Empathy, compassion, and understanding are the only things left that's going to save humanity and our world. My mother is a what? In spite of feeling misplaced and unwanted, I managed to get straight A's through high school and college, graduating magna cum laude with a double major in Spanish and Humanities from Providence College. Good grades, sports, and school were a pleasure. They distracted me from the emptiness I felt inside and the lack of stability and security at home. My send-off to college by my father was when I learned about my biological parents. I never knew anything about myself. I was in the dark for my entire childhood, lost and confused about who I was and where I was from. I remember the night distinctly. My father set me down on the couch, something he rarely did, and said to me, "Peanut," his nickname for me. Peanut, really, because I was so little when they adopted me. "Peanut, I want to tell you about your biological mother." Nervous with anticipation, thinking I would finally understand who I was, he continued, "Your mother was a prostitute and a heroin addict. She was Italian American. We don't know anything about your father." What? Not expecting that, I burst into tears, which I never did in front of anyone. My father didn't do anything to comfort me. No hugs, no hand-holding, no continuing conversation, no way to process my feelings, no therapy. That was it. I'm sure he was intoxicated at the time. Whatever little self-esteem I had managed to salvage was now gone. My mother is a prostitute, stayed etched in my brain and sank deep into my psyche. Not the best way to send your vulnerable young daughter off to college.